Right, okay. So, we need to do a quick recap. Don't put it up quite yet. We've been doing our superhero Old Testament superheroes over the last few weeks, haven't we? Yes, brilliant, you're getting this. You have to answer. Thank you very much. So, the first one we had was, can you remember? Moses. And our memory verse, because we've been having memory verses each week over the holidays, our memory verse was, hands up, and Ralph is going to run and ask you. Here's my running man. Where we are. Who's remembered it? Oh, Steve. There we are. Run, 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 run. Is he cheating?
I'm just looking at the Bible, yeah.
You're meant to remember it, Steve.
I did. It's Psalm 18:16. Well, Psalm 18, yeah.
Yeah, and what does it say?
It says, He reached down from heaven and rescued me. He drew me out of deep waters.
Amen. Well done. But you cheated. Okay. So week 2, our superhero was? Joshua. Thank you. And our memory verse was, without cheating? Who's put your hands up?
John 10:10. Here we are.
John. Yeah, John 10:10.
I heard a voice.
Right, go for it. Let me hear. The thief.
Give life eternal.
Life to full. Well done, sort of. Okay. Now last week, so that's only a week to remember, our superhero character was Deborah. And our memory verse was, hands up, and Ralph is coming to you. There we are, at the front, Alistair at the front.
First Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 11.
Yeah.
Encourage each other and build each other up as we're already doing.
Well done, brilliant. Okay, thank you very much, Ralph. This week, our Old Testament, thank you. Now this week, our Old Testament superhero is Samson. Well done. Now helping me this week, just getting ready behind me, is Robbie and Ross. And I have asked them to tell us the story of Samson. So let's listen to them telling us the story of Samson, which is found in the book of Judges, chapter 13 to 16. Okay, now I'm going to run up, because there's lots of clicks to be done.
So, Ross, Mum has given us the job this morning of telling this wonderful congregation the story about Samson.
Samson? Is he that big, super strong man with Rapunzel long hair?
Yes, that's right. However, we have to tell the story in a fun and interesting way in order to engage all these wonderfully smiling faces this morning.
It seems a bit hard for you, Dad.
Well, Mum thinks we are up to the challenge.
Well, I guess you better nail this then.
We better. Okay, so Samson, let's do the story of Samson. Let's start at the beginning.
Well, he was very little, obviously, and he was probably born as a super strong baby.
Well, yes, he was born at a very early age, and yes, he was very little, but he was just a regularly sized baby boy. But one day before he was born, an angel came and told Samson's mum and dad that God had a very special plan for his life. Samson would be a hero.
Oh, like Superman.
Yeah, well, yes and no, but listen to the story.
Sorry.
You see, Samson's parents and all the Israelites were being bullied by Philistines.
Philistine? What, was he Irish or something? Was he really into Fiona? La, you could sort of the family tree and something, we could know.
No, it wasn't a chap named Phil. His surname wasn't Osteen. It was the Philistines, and they were some really bad men, a whole army of them, and God wanted Samson to sort them out, to deal with them.
Oh, so he just jumped into a tank of fat and fatted them all.
No, there were no tanks then, Ross. Remember, God gave him super strength to defeat the Philistines.
Oh yeah, so he did. Hang on. Defeat. You mean as in like they took all their feet off? LOL.
Oh my goodness. Right, oh dear. Ross, listen. If Samson wanted to stay super strong, there were some important rules that he had to follow.
Sorry, Dad. I was trying to make it fun and interesting. No.
No. There we are.
Like some of the manners that, like some of the rules that, like, you know, Mom gives us. Like, remember your manners. Look people in the eye when you're talking to them. Give them a firm handshake. Don't bite your nails. Well, we both know that we're not good at that one anyway.
We're not very good at those rules. But not like those rules. Samson's rules were different. Rule number 1, never cut his hair.
Oh, so Samson could not just get like a little wee trim, you know, keep the hair out of his eyes.
No, not even a little trim. Samson could not get his hair cut. Even a little bit off the top or anything to the side would mean losing his super strength.
Yikes, on a bike.
Yeah, well, rule number 2, he was not allowed to eat any unclean food.
What, was he like supposed to wash everything? Like give a scrub of a steak pie, have a soggy sandwich? Or like, what about the 5-second rule? Oh, man.
Well, not quite, Ross, but back then there were certain kinds of food that the Israelites were not allowed to eat. For example, pigs.
Oh, well, like no bacon. Oh, Scott would have hated that rule. He loves a good bacon roll.
Scott's not the only one that likes a nice bacon roll. Anyway, but it was okay because Samson didn't mind that. That was the rules, and he had his super strength.
Oh, yeah.
So Samson grew up following the rules, and he became super strong.
Oh, like the Hulk strong. Like, tell me some examples of like how strong.
Well, one day while he was walking along, a huge lion attacked him, and Samson fought the lion and ripped the lion apart with his bare hands.
Bare hands. What? You did tell me that Samson was like half man, half bear. Was it because like he had so much hair? Was it like a grizzly bear or like a polar bear?
Ross, seriously?
Sorry, Dad. I was trying to make it fun and interesting, like you said earlier on.
Yes, okay. Right, let's get back to Samson and let's get back to some examples of his strength. And one day he was surrounded by the Philistine army and he killed 1,000 Philistines with his only weapon, a donkey's jawbone that he picked up from the ground.
Okay, now that is impressive.
Now that is impressive. And another time the Philistines had trapped him in an enemy city behind gates and there was no way out. So Samson just picked up the gates and ripped them apart and tore them open.
Well, that is some super strength. Even Fraser with his big guns could attempt such a thing.
Yes, well, super strength indeed. But Samson had a problem. And for all his super strength, he didn't pick very good friends. He spent a lot of time with people who didn't love God, and he even started hanging out with some Philistines.
Oh, Samson, you idiot.
Indeed he was, and Samson became very close to a Philistine woman called Delilah.
Oh, you mean that woman in like that, you know that Tom Jones song? Going from like Irish to Welsh, to like Welsh now, like, my Delilah.
Same name, completely different story. The song is, Tom Jones is not singing about Delilah in the Bible, Ross.
Oh, okay, so like Samson was like not supposed to be hanging out with the Philistines, so like was he? Were they like the bad
That's right,
guys,
Ross,
you
they
know?
were the baddies and he should not have been hanging out with any of them. Delilah was not a good friend at all, and she was trying to trick Samson into telling her how he had his superpower strength. You see, she was secretly working for the Philistine army like a spy, but she wanted to find out what his weakness was.
Oh, like kryptonite is like Superman's. I get ya. Uh-huh.
Like that, yes, Delilah was trying to help the Philistines capture Samson.
That is not good.
No, it's not. And Delilah asked Samson over and over and over and over and over and over and over again where his superpower strength came from.
Oh, so like over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, like Mama asked you to do those things.
Well, let's not talk about that. I think it was a little bit more nagging than Mum does, honestly. Eventually, Samson gave in and told her that if he cut his hair off, then he would lose his strength.
Oh, I don't think he should have told her that.
No, he should not have. And that night, while Samson was sleeping, the Philistines sneaked into his room and cut off his hair. And he woke, trying to fight them, but his superpower strength was gone. And Samson became a slave for the rest of his life until just at the end, God answered his prayer and gave him superpower strength just one more time. And standing between two pillars in a temple in Philistines, he pushed the pillars that were supporting the roof, and they came down, killing all 3,000 Philistines that were in there, including their leaders. But sadly, Samson also died as well.
Oh, so Samson hanging out with all those wrong Philistines is like a warning to us all.
That's right, Ross. We need to be careful about who is influencing us. You know, I think this is a good point to hand over to Mum now.
I think that's a good idea.
Well done, boys. Thank you very much. I don't know what I enjoyed more, Fraser cringing at the front or... Thank you very much. So this morning, I'm going to try and keep it as brief as I can, but it's quite a big story, isn't it? There's lots to kind of try and pack in. And there's lots of lessons that we can learn. And hopefully this morning, there's something for each of us to take home. Because we're all at different stages, aren't we, on our journey? So hopefully this morning, we've got something for each of us to take home. Samson was born a Nazarite, meaning he was separate or set aside. He was set apart for God. And as the boy said, there were certain rules that he had to obey. And among those rules were he couldn't eat or drink certain foods or certain drinks, and he wasn't allowed to cut his hair. He was set apart for a special service for God. And there are many scriptures telling us about the importance that we are set apart, aren't they, for God, that we are separate from the world. As we learned when we were doing our First Peter series, we are to be aliens and strangers in the world, but not of it. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of the Olympic gold medalist, Eric Liddell. At the 1924 Summer Olympics in Paris, Eric Liddell refused to run in the heats as his favoured 100-metre race because they were held on a Sunday. We know the story. Instead, he competed in the 400 metres because it was held on a weekday. And in the film Chariots of Fire, Eric Liddell says to his sister Jenny, let's just watch what he says to his sister Jenny.
I've decided. I'm going back to China. The missionary service have accepted me.
Oh, I'm so pleased.
But I've got a lot of running to do first. Jenny, you've got to understand. I believe that God made me for a purpose. For China. But He also made me fast. And when I run, I feel His pleasure. To give it up would be to hold Him in contempt. You were right. It's not just fun. To win is to honour Him. Jenny.
Don't know if you caught that what he said. Right. We put the next slide up. I believe God made me for a purpose, but He also made me fast. And when I run, I feel His pleasure. Since I was a child, that statement has stuck with me. Eric, as a young man, realised the simple ability to run fast was a gift from God, and that will help him to fulfil his destiny. It's quite a statement. When I run, I feel his pleasure. He's saying, when I use the gift that God has given me, I know he is pleased with me. And that's really stuck with me. Samson had a special gift from God, didn't he? And we have all got different gifts, haven't we? As we learned last week, I just want to recap what I said last week. We are all important to God. He uses both men and women in lots of different roles. He gives gifts to both men and women. It's not about one gender being more important than the other. It's about us all being who God has called us to be. And we all need to spend time with God, developing and strengthening our gifts and those abilities that he's given us. Now, sadly, Samson ignored his Nazirite vow of godly devotion and relied upon his own strength and his own abilities rather than upon God's. And how many of us here this morning would be honest enough to relate to that sometimes we forget and we rely on our own strength for things, don't we? Or is it just me?
No.
Although he had great superpower strength, as the boys told us, Samson was also very weak. He gave in to temptation. He gave in to the pressures that were round about him because he associated with the wrong person or with the wrong people. The lesson for us all in that is that the deeper we allow ourselves to be influenced by the glamour and the temptation of sin, the more blinded we can become. It's interesting because Samson became spiritually blind and then he became physically blind when the Philistines, how can I say it in a less gruesome way, they removed his eyes, didn't they, at the end. We must accept the reality that sin can seep deep in our lives. Sin has a blinding, numbing effect upon us. If we don't understand this, we can find ourselves tangled in it, can't we? Just as Samson did. Let's remember, when we are weak, he is strong. And to trust in his strength, because he will never leave us. It's us, isn't it, that sometimes turn our back a bit, isn't it? He'll never leave us. He'll always love us. It's with us. We must always remember and keep short accounts with Jesus. Because, you know, Delilahs can show up in our lives at any point. None of us are exempt. And I'm not purely talking about sexual sin here. I'm talking about all sin. We all need to be aware of who is around us, whose voice is the loudest, whose voice can we hear above everything else. You know, my mum used to say to me when I was a teenager and going out with non-Christian friends, she would say to me, it's easier to pull someone off a table than it is to pull somebody onto a table. Meaning, watch out, Karen. Don't let others drag you down. It's hard to pull people up, isn't it? Very easy to pull them off. And that stuck with me, and I've said it to my boys as well. And this leads me nicely to this week's memory verse. Are we ready? It's really long this week. I thought I'd be kind to you all, and we'll go for a short one. Half a verse from Proverbs chapter 12, verse 26a. The righteous choose their friends carefully. Let me hear you say it. The righteous choose their friends carefully. Will you remember that one now? That's a good one to remember, isn't it? Be careful about who your friends are. Like we learned last week from Barak, he wanted Deborah to go with him, didn't he? He knew Deborah was a godly woman, and that's who he wanted beside him when he was going into battle. And when we were all challenged last week, weren't we? When we're facing our Red Sea, or when we're facing our giant wall, to find somebody to walk with us, to find somebody to be a Deborah. And we were also challenged to be a Deborah ourselves, weren't we? To be a Deborah for somebody else. We all need to be influencers for Jesus. And to do this, we need to be very careful about who influences us. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying you can't have non-Christian friends. I'm not saying that at all, because I've got lots. It's really about whose voice are you listening to? Whose voice in your life is the loudest? Jesus should actually be the loudest voice, shouldn't he? Jesus should be our best friend. What a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege we have to carry everything to God in prayer. Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. And Samson lost everything, didn't he? And in the end, it cost him his physical sight, his freedom, his dignity, and eventually his own life. And no doubt, as he sat in prison, he probably felt a complete failure. This morning, maybe there's somebody here who feels a bit of a failure. Perhaps you might think it's too late to turn back to God. The exciting thing is, this morning, it's never too late, is it? It's never too late to turn back to God. And perhaps there's somebody this morning, I don't want to presume anything at all. Perhaps there's somebody this morning that's here that doesn't know and has never known that relationship with Jesus. You know, God created us to have relationship with him, and sin got in the way. Sin separates us from God, and the Bible tells us that all have sinned. God made that way for us to have relationship with him by sending Jesus to die on that cross. And he took that place, didn't he? He took that place on the cross for us, for all our sin that we've done and will do. And he paid the ultimate price for us. And we remembered that this morning as we shared communion together. But praise God, death could not hold him, could it? It could not hold him. And he rose again. And if we put our trust in him, put our trust in Jesus, the Bible tells us that we will have eternity with him. As the hymn Amazing Grace puts it, when we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun. And as John said last Sunday night, as he was sharing his testimony, it could easily be changed, couldn't it, to when we've been there 10 trillion years, bright shining as the sun. We will be with him for eternity. But life with Jesus doesn't start then. It starts now, today, right now, if we ask him to forgive us, if we turn around and we follow him. And if you've never done that before and you'd like to know more, I'd love to chat with you after the service. Or if you're feeling a bit like Samson and that you've turned your back on God, or you've started slightly and you've noticed, you've realised, I'm going the wrong direction here. stop where you are and turn around and come and speak to me after the service. In the film Chariots of Fire, I'm going back to it again. I don't know if you remember the clip where Eric was running and he fell early in a 440-yard race. Let's just look at that now.
Get up. Come on! Come on! It's not back yet. Come on!
That actual race took place during a triangular contest meet between Scotland, England and Ireland in Stoke-on-Trent in July 1923, just if you're interested. Liddell was knocked down to the ground several strides into the race. He hesitated, as we saw, got up, pursued his opponents 20 yards ahead. And as we saw, he caught the leaders shortly before the finish line and collapsed after crossing the tape. He was knocked down. Those round about him knocked him down. But he got up again. And if you've been knocked down, it's never too late to get up again. Samson was blind and humbled. Finally, he realised his utter dependence upon God. And he, like the song, Amazing Grace, he once was blind, but now he could see. No matter how far you've fallen, it's never, no matter how much you feel you failed, it's never too late to humble yourself and return back to God. The important thing here is that we finish the race.
It says in the old book, he that honours me, I will honour. Good luck, Jackson Schultz. So where does the power come from to see the race to its end? From within. Jenny, I believe God made me for a purpose. But He also made me fast. And when I run, I feel His pleasure.
There we are, the band is just going to come up now onto the stage just as I finish off. The lifelong journey that we're on, it's not a sprint or a 440-yard race, which, if you're interested, is actually a quarter of a mile. It's more like a long endurance marathon. Eric Parker, one of our former pastors, used to say, "How have you fought? How have you run? What have you thought, said, and done?" It's quite a question, isn't it? Ultimately, through his sacrificial death, Samson turned his mistakes into victory. Let's allow Samson's example persuade us. It's never too late to return to God. Jesus is waiting with open arms, isn't he? Jesus' sacrificial death on the cross for you and for me paid the debt, and he is waiting for us to come to him. Let's remember to watch out for Delilahs, to choose who our closest friends are very carefully, and to watch out whose voice is the loudest. The righteous choose their friends carefully. I've asked the band to lead us in Amazing Grace. Let's sing this together, and as we do, let's recognise the amazing grace of Jesus. It's amazing, isn't it, what he has done for you and for me. Let's thank him as we're singing it for all that he's done, and prayerfully recognise our utter dependence upon God.